I think my neighbors, lawn gnomes, formed a cult. I've never been much for lawn decorations, but my next-door neighbor, a widow in her early 70s, is. She has just about every type of lawn ornament you can think of, but if one type is her favorite, it's the gnomes. At least they were. They're gone now. All 12 of them. I don't know why, I don't know where, but I don't think it was the kids on the block or a sudden change of heart. I think they formed a cult. It's hard to say exactly when all of this started. I didn't exactly make a habit of keeping track of Mrs. Ellis lawn ornaments. I guess there were a few standouts. One had a little rake, one pushed a wheelbarrow, and one looked like it was fighting a garden hose. But other than that, well, they were just lawn gnomes. I do remember when I started to notice, though. It was subtle at first. A slight shift of position, the wheelbarrow facing the wrong way. Things like that. But one morning, as I was taking my trash can to the curb, I saw one face down in the street. Feeling a sense of neighborly obligation, I picked it up and turned to Mrs. Ellis' lawn to spot where it had come from. That's when I noticed the gnomes were all facing the street. Wheelbarrow, rake, and garden hose stood in a perfect line a few feet from the curb. The others lined up behind them, their lifeless ceramic eyes fixed on their fallen comrade. They wore the same painted expressions as always, but they seemed more satisfied. I glanced up and down the empty street, then back at the gnome in my hands. Its paint was chipped like it had been thrown on the pavement. I let out a breath and shook my head. I began walking towards Mrs. Ellis' front door. I figured it would be best if she dealt with this. I'll admit, something about seeing a woman in her 70s mourning a ceramic lawn ornament broke my heart. I guess when your husband of 52 years passes away without any children to call your own, an army of lawn gnomes can be some kind of stand-in. Mrs. Ellis gasped when she saw what was in my hands. "Oh, Mr. Pennyhill, what have they done to you?" she cried, tearing it from my hands. "Peter, his hat. Oh dear, where is his little hat?" I hadn't noticed the hat or lack of a hat. I glanced at the other gnomes. Each one had a pointy red hat atop their head. I shook my head slightly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Ellis. I didn't see a hat in the road I said, but she held up a hand as if to stop me. "They're always picking on Mr. Pennyhill, Peter. It's not your fault." She turned to the gnome, "But we'll fix you up right as rain, won't we?" "Who is?" "The kids, or I can talk to their parents for you if." I paused when I saw her eyes drift a little. "Oh, no need, Peter, but thank you. I'll just fix him up and straighten this mess out." Mrs. Ellis then turned and went inside, whispering reassuring words to the damaged gnome. I walked back to my house, passing the gnomes as I went. Stupid prank. When I got home from work, Mrs. Ellis had rearranged her yard, all 12 gnomes back in their places. Mrs. Ellis had repainted Mr. Pennyhill, but it stood out from the rest. She had done a great job repairing the face, even adding a small painted bandage on its cheek. But as good as the repair was, it was still missing the hat. I wish that's where this whole thing ended. Maybe then I could have just chalked it up to kids messing with an old woman. But the next morning, something else had changed. The gnomes were roughly where they had been the night before, but they all faced the center of the yard. I followed their gaze and saw that someone had moved 3 of those glass spheres, gazing balls, I think they're called, into an almost perfect triangular pattern. Something lay at its center. I know it was none of my business, but I had to check it out. As I got closer, I saw a pile of ceramic shards. I picked one up. It had been newly painted. A small bandage ran across it. I didn't have the heart to tell Mrs. Ellis this time. This one was beyond repair, so I scooped up the pieces and threw them away. Somehow that felt like a better option than having her find him like that. I figured when something you love disappears, you at least have hope it's still out there somewhere, hopefully in a better place. Anyway, at this point, I was convinced the neighborhood kids were playing a prank. There's not much to do around here. Had it just been moving lawn gnomes around, I might not have said anything. But destroying one was a little too far. None of the parents had a clue. Most of them said their kids were too afraid of that yard to go near it. Even the Dirks boys, who'd blown up just about everything else in the neighborhood, wouldn't go near it. One of them asked me why I did. Up to that point, I hadn't thought much about it. It all seemed like a prank to me, a bad one at that. But now I was the only one other than Mrs. Ellis that wasn't afraid of that yard. If it wasn't a prank, then there was nothing else that made sense. I passed the lawn on my way home and stopped for a while to look at it. I counted 11 gnomes, 3 gazing balls, one of those multicolored pinwheels, and 10 other assorted deal of the day ornaments. But the gazing balls were more spread out now, still triangular but much farther apart. The gnomes were arranged within it, all circled around the gnome with the rake. For the first time, I felt like I was interrupting something. I caught myself staring. It was time to go home. The next morning, I stepped outside to see Mrs. Ellis pacing around the lawn. She was holding her head, mumbling to herself. I walked over. As I rounded the small hedge row that separated our lots, I saw it. The 3 gazing balls were still there. Same triangle pattern as the night before, but the lawn, between the 3 glass orbs, there was nothing left, just bare earth and 11 little red pointy hats. Submitted by /U or Arctos Things link comments. Someone knocked on my door at 2:13 a.m. I don't usually wake up in the middle of the night, but when I do, there's always a reason. At least that's what I used to believe. 3 nights ago, I woke up suddenly and checked my phone out of habit. 2:13 a.m. That's when I heard it. A knock, not loud, not aggressive, just a single, clear knock on my front door. I froze in bed, listening carefully. I live alone, and no one ever visits me, especially not at that hour. For a moment, I thought I imagined it. Then it came again. Knock. Same sound, same rhythm, calm, almost polite. I got up slowly, trying not to make any noise. My heart was already racing, but I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone at the wrong house. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed something strange. The knocking stopped. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the front door from a distance. The house felt too quiet, like it was waiting. I didn't open the door. Instead, I checked the peephole. Nothing, just darkness outside. No movement, no silhouette, no one standing there. I let out a small breath, feeling a bit stupid. Maybe it really was nothing. Maybe I knock. I flinched so hard I almost stumbled back. This time, it didn't come from the front door. It came from behind me, from inside the house. I turned slowly, my entire body going cold. The sound had come from the hallway wall just a few feet away. A soft, deliberate knock, like someone was on the other side. But that wall leads nowhere. On the other side of it is just empty space between my house and the neighbors. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The wall was slightly indented, not much, just enough to look wrong. And the knock. This time, the sound came from right behind the wall. Closer. I backed away, unable to look away from that spot. My breathing got heavier as a horrible thought started forming in my mind. Something was inside the wall, and it knew I was there. I rushed back into my bedroom and locked the door, grabbing my phone with shaking hands. I didn't call the police. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there in silence, listening. For the next few minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, I heard it again, not knocking this time. Scratching, faint at first, then louder, like nails dragging across wood from the inside. It moved along the wall, getting closer to my bedroom. I could hear exactly where it was, tracking it as it got nearer and nearer, until it stopped, right outside my door. Everything went completely silent. I held my breath, staring at the door, waiting for anything to happen. Then, in a voice so quiet, I almost thought it was in my head. I heard it. "Can you let me out?" I didn't move. I didn't answer. I stayed there until morning, too terrified to even blink. When the sun finally came up, everything felt normal again. No sounds, no scratches, nothing. I convinced myself it was some kind of nightmare. I even laughed about it later that day. But tonight, at exactly 2:13 a.m., I heard the knock again. Only this time, it came from my bedroom door. Submitted by /U or Real Horror Hub link comments. I've been engineered to kill my siblings since birth. My brother has been trying to off me since we were kids. He was Daddy's favorite. His methods used to be amateur, foxglove mixed into my chili, a cheeky shove down the stairs at a fundraiser. When, a year younger, equally unhinged. He tried to slice my throat when I was 8. When you're rich, actions do not have consequences. From birth, we knew we were special. Knew we had to fight to inherit our father's fortune. If we fucked up, we either shifted the blame or covered it up. Wen killed a classmate in his sophomore year. 1 5-minute phone call with our mother, and the boy never existed. Arabella was the youngest, the smartest. She played people like cards. I wasn't any better, the stereotypical rich bitch. As long as we made donations, we could get away with anything. 0 consequences made killing each other easier. 0 consequences meant 0 empathy. When we were 16, Arabella tried to burn us and the estate alive. Daddy lectured us in his office. Going against him meant getting my gold card revoked. So I pasted on a smile, "Sorry, Daddy." "William?" Daddy nodded at my brother, who rolled his eyes. "Sure," he muttered. Wen didn't say anything, arms folded, gaze glued to the ceiling. Arabella stood silently, a charred matchstick clenched between manicured nails. "Hold hands," Dad instructed us. Now, we did, reluctantly. I grabbed Arabella's hand, who snatched Will's. Wen, after exhaling a long, dragged-out sigh, accepted Will's. It was humiliating. My blood boiled, my cheeks burned. Arabella's hand was too cold, Will's was too warm. Slimy. Arabella drove the heel of her $800,000 stiletto into my toe when Daddy wasn't looking. Will dug bloody half-moons into my palms. The two of them wore wide smiles for Daddy, perfect porcelain poker faces, while squeezing the breath from my lungs. Daddy's lips curved into a smile. That wasn't hard now, was it? He leaned forward. Daddy was old, not normal old, rotting corpse old. I expected him to be 6 feet fucking under by my junior year. "I want my children to always be together," Daddy crooned. His tone held a terrifying authority I couldn't disobey. So we made an unspoken pact. When our father breathed his last breath, the killing game would continue. But Dad didn't die until I was 24, 98 years old. 8 years had passed, enough years for resentment and hatred to fizzle out. Enough time for me to develop an attachment to my siblings. I cared that Will was engaged. I cared that Arabella and her girlfriend were trying IVF. I cared about Wen and his stupid private island full of stray kitties. So, the day that Mom called me crying with the news, I felt lost. Wrong. I retrieved my gun from my bedroom, the one I'd hid as a 16-year-old, promising myself I would shoot my siblings dead the moment our father croaked. Will immediately tried to kill me when I turned up at his apartment, gun pointed between his eyes. I remembered how to find the perfect trajectory. But my brother wasn't stupid. He opened the door, kitchen knife already tracing the curve of my throat. Wen was sitting on his sofa, legs crossed, nursing his bruised eye. Arabella leaned against the wall, cigarette between her lips, a golden lock of hair twirled around her finger. She'd been scalped, half of her ponytail ripped out. Her dress was torn, a gaping wound in her arm. Will's apartment was trashed. His lounge resembled a war zone, couch tipped over, telltale splatters of blood staining rich marble. "Wait," Will whispered when I tried to pull out my gun. "Ruby, wait." I let my hand drop, and in turn, he let his knife hit the ground. "Dad left us a letter," he whispered, his breath heavy in my face. My brother held up an envelope sealed with Dad's signature. "Before we do anything." "Rash," he gasped out. "We should probably read it." I surrendered my weapon. "Right." Will stepped back with a grin. "Then we'll open it together." Arabella and Wen joined us, and we ripped it open. The letter itself was folded into a tiny pocket square. I impatiently watched my brother unfold it, my hands already twitching to pull out the knife I'd hidden in my jeans' back pocket. "My dear children," Will read out, holding the letter up to the light. Dad's writing was barely legible, written in intricate black ink. "My final wish is for you to be together," Will read out, his lips forming a smile. He let out a relieved breath, and I dropped all pretense, that feral, almost animalistic urge in my bones bleeding away. So, Will continued, his voice breaking. His hands holding the letter began to tremble. I have organized a procedure to be conducted the second I take my last breath. He dropped the letter, letting out a hiss. What the fuck? I snatched it up, scanning the rest. Do not worry, I've tested it on animals and then human subjects. The full merge of the four of you, your bodies and minds melded together. That is my last wish. Wen snatched the letter off of me and pulled out a lighter. This never fucking happened. He hissed out, igniting the parchment under a dancing flame. We never read it. The fucking thing never existed. I watched Dad's letter erupt into smoldering black. A sickly-looking Arabella nodded, grabbing my hand. Then the door flew open. A suited man, a lancing flung over the top. He smiled widely. The Devier siblings? Ah, good, you're all here, he said. He led in several people wearing surgical masks. The man pulled on light blue gloves, already stained scarlet, and held up a syringe, filling it with blue liquid. I'm here to fulfill your father's last wish. He nodded at me, lips splitting into a grin. Ruby, you will be the head. Submitted by /U or /Tierlink comments.